What's going on, guys? It's Yoji. Welcome to another video where I will tell you why I think it is a good idea in 3.14 to start with Solo-Selffound. Maybe for the first time, and maybe come back to it. I'll try to make an argument why I think Solo-Selffound is probably better than ever this patch, and in this league and expansion and season and DLC and whatever you want to call this thing. And there are quite a few reasons for this. Even with Harvest nerfed, I think SSF is still in a great spot, even for not super experienced players, or if you're just looking for a change of pace. So let's have a look. This is like an overview of why I think SSF is going to be really cool, and one of the main reasons is trade can be kind of annoying. I'll go into all of these like a little bit in more detail. Also, I have a second video coming up. Well, not coming out, that is also out right now. I released these two at the same time, where I will go about 5 major tips that I think are very helpful when you want to start SSF, and like if you are looking for some advice on how to get going, what to look for, what not to do. So that can be useful as well. I'll link that below in the comments section and in the video description and in all the things. And by the way, while you're down there, just hit the subscribe button as well. So yeah, trade can be annoying. You don't have to do like all this super optimized currency farming when you are in Solo-Selffound. So if you kind of feel annoyed by that, that might be a good reason to try SSF if you are not the type of person who optimizes his currency farming. It can give new value to items in very different ways, so we'll talk about that. And it allows you, if you're like an old PoE player especially, see PoE in a new light. And also a little bit of a reminder as a fifth point. SSF is still a hard mode, so it's not all shiny and fun and easy and UPA, best game mode ever. There are downsides to it, so we want to talk about those as well. So let's go into the first one. Trade is annoying. Trade can be annoying. Players not responding, scammers, price fixing, you know the deal. Like sometimes you see an item you really wanted, you click the whisper thing and people are offline, the item's already sold, the trade API can be super slow, that's also on their trade API problems. There even have been moments of basically enforced Solo-Selffound where GGG had to temporarily disable the whole trade API because everything went down. Stuff like that can happen, and the problem is when you go into trading, as opposed to SSF, into a league mechanic, you plan your build around the idea that you will trade for certain key items early on, right? So maybe if you're playing, let's say, a Flicker Strike build, you plan to, for example, buy a Terminus-S sword, stuff like that. And if you can't do that, then your build is completely gimped. While if you go into SSF, you will plan around not being able to buy items, so you are already immune to any trade nerfs or like trade downtime that might be happening. Also, the economy cannot mess with your plans, basically. You know, the famous, infamous Mathel effect, where a streamer plays a build, or a build suddenly becomes popular that you wanted to play, and suddenly all the items are freaking expensive because everyone is gravitating towards that build and buying up all the items that you wanted for your previously maybe pretty niche and pretty cheap build that you had planned. So that can be pretty tricky, and it's something that SSF will prevent. So that's kind of nice. Here's also a thing that I think you should not play SSF for just the reason that you don't like trade, because I think it is more healthy and it will be more likely for you to actually enjoy SSF if you don't want trade, but there's also something in SSF that you want from it. So there's like a positive reinforcement, not just like the negative reinforcement to SSF of I hate trade, but if there's something that you're like, I hate trade and I really like this aspect of Solo-Selffound in particular, then I think you will be very happy in SSF. So just keep that in mind. If you just want to get away from trade, I mean, you can still try it, but I think that it might not last you if that's your only motivation. And also, the SSF makes it way easier to play at your own pace. You don't feel like you're falling behind the economy. You're not missing out on anything, because you basically turn the game into a single-player game, unless you're racing for the SSF ladder, of course. But even in ladder races, I would argue that SSF has more competitive integrity, because you rely on yourself more and you don't rely on group play. I mean, if you like group play, then by all means go for it, but that's like a whole different game, basically. Then next up we got the whole there we go. The whole idea that in Trade League everything is basically convertible to currency, and that way buying becomes the best way to acquire everything. Every item, every type of content, every piece of gear, every map fragment, every map juice. everything, access to content, everything can be acquired by currency, and if you find the optimal way to farm currency, the optimal strategy, then there's very little reason to not just do the optimal strategy if your main goal is to get ahead and to make progress in the game. And SSF basically, like being self-found, basically erases all of that, because the content you farm depends on what you need as an item, or like to what content you want access to. If you want an item from Shaper, you better farm some Shaper Guardians and do everything you can, such as Atlas passive, to make it more likely to find Shaper Guardian maps. Then you farm these Shaper Guardians, and then you farm Shaper to, for example, eventually maybe get a Dying Sun or the Shaper boots if you need like a pierce for, so you build something like this. You get the idea, right? So it's not all about the exalted drops, and in fact exalted drops in SSF after a certain point are actually pretty unvaluable, and you can actually use them on items and slam them at times as well, especially now with Harvest not being slammable on everything, so you actually have more value in exalted orbs again in Solo-Selffound. Before, I ended last league with like 12 unused exalted orbs, simply because aside from multi-modding and actually using them on like jewels and items when Harvest is not a thing, so for example if you have a influenced item now, you can't slam on those anymore, then you can actually use them, which is kind of nice as well. Yeah. And there's less farming the same content for that reason. So you're not farming the optimal strategy over and over and over, but you're farming, what content you're farming depends on what you want to do. So if you lack variety currently in your gameplay state, then Solo-Selffound is good. Of course, if you enjoy farming the same content over and over, it's not as good of a strategy in SSF, because you will need items from different game mechanics and game mode. Like you will need like an Azir's Promise, so you have to do Azir. You will need a Dying Sun, you have to do Shaper. You need something like some fossils. You will have to do like either Delve or High, so something that drops fossils, right? That's basically how SSF works. But that can be a plus side, but I can see how it can be a negative side as well. Now for item value and how it can change in SSF. I think that's something that a lot of people know. Everything can basically be a chase item, and everything can be an exciting drop in Solo-Selffound, such as a Soul Tether that's probably not worth much in Trade League, or a what's called Essence Worm. Those can be chase items. Those can be exciting drops. Like if you're like, oh, I've had an Essence Worm in my build, I kind of planned around it with like it in mind, but if this actually drops, it's gonna be amazing. And then it drops, and you like porg out as if you found like 2 Doctor cards. That's the SSF life. You will have way more of these amazing item drop moments in Solo-Selffound than you will ever have in Trade League, in my opinion. You might not be as excited about exalted or orb drops in Solo-Selffound, but on the flip side, you are more excited about just like these rare item upgrades, maybe like an influence base, maybe you're chasing certain uniques, you're chancing or ancient orbing for, let's say, a Soul Tether belt. So that's really, really nice. And boss farming, yeah, as I said earlier, it's more of a thing, and the same is true for divination card farming. That's why there's a Chevron's Wrappings and a Pledge of Hands. These can actually be found via divination cards, and Chevron's pretty easily for like such a rare item. I feel it's not like too easy or anything, but it's farmable. Let's put it that way. While Pledge of Hands the cards are pretty rare, it's pretty difficult, but you can also always do the Harvest divination card gamble, which I think is an amazing addition to try and gamble for more cards and like skip some progression, and you get super excited for this. And it's not always about the same Doctor cards, the same Headhunters, the same Mirror stuff. That's like, you basically either use it on the best use case or you don't use it at all. That doesn't exist in SSF. It's not about that anymore. There's no more, it's not worth doing. Like, Shaper set costs 20 chaos, but the best drop you can get is 15 chaos. Oh, running Shaper is not worth it anymore. And but what if you really enjoy Shaper? So yeah, instead, you don't think more about like what is it worth doing, but more like, okay, which items do I need, where can I get them, and what content should I be focusing on and doing, depending on what items my character currently needs. And that makes your experience very personalized. And you can even plan your build around this. So for example, you plan a build and you're like, okay, if I make this build, I really need an item from Uber Aziri, but I hate the Uber Aziri fights. I guess you can just like actually decide to either build your character differently or play a different character, right? So that's something that you can like bring into your experience, and you can basically choose what content you will farm by planning ahead and planning your build and planning your experience yourself. So you are much more in power and much more in control of what your Path of Exile experience will look like, which I think is an amazing thing about SSF. Alright, this one mostly applies to people who yeah, I've been playing Path of Exile for a long time, maybe a bit burned out, maybe just like want a bit of fresh air in their PoE day-to-day PoE life. And if you want some fresh air in your day-to-day PoE life, you should really subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. There's more videos like this and other stuff coming out. I make everything between memes, guides, just philosophical rambles, rants, and just like some general tips for people. So yeah, if you enjoy this type of content, go ahead and join the OG fam. As I said, it's a good way to prevent PoE burnout, and because it forces you to break old habits. If you have like a strat that you always go to every league, for example, maybe you are like, okay, every league early on, I just like try to rush Aziri, buy some Aziri, sell some Aziri's promises, make some wealth that way. I mean, it can be nice and cozy to have like a fallback go-to strategy, but it can also be really tricky to break these habits and see PoE in a different light. Because if you get bored, if you actually have like a bit of a burnout, you're like, oh, this stuff again, then the limitations of SSF can actually force you to be more creative, to rethink your whole approach, to relearn certain aspects of the game, maybe some aspects of the game that you chose to ignore in the past, such as, for example, maybe you didn't learn Betrayal, but now Betrayal has a drop that you really want for your build, such as, what's the flask called? The flask from Katarina? That's a really good flask. That I forgot the name of, but if you want that one, then Cinder Swallow Urn. Now it came back. Cinder Swallow Urn. If you want that one, then maybe you can you can suddenly like, oh, maybe I should learn Betrayal, learn how to get as many Katarinas as possible, found that flask, or like some other rewards. You get the deal. Like you will be forced to try out different things, which can be a good thing, right? And it's also harder to it's just like in general harder, of course, and it can make leagues take longer for you. If you're someone like, oh, I always quit the league like 3 to 4 weeks in, because I did everything I wanted to do, but you kind of want that league to last longer for you. League goals take longer to complete in SSF. I mean, you're probably not surprised by that. So I think that's I think a very, very important factor, and that brings me to the next point. That is, it is a hard mode. Stuff does take longer to complete. Stuff is more difficult to complete. So Solo-Selffound progression is harder and it takes longer than in trade. And if you don't like that idea, then SSF might not be for you. If you're like, why would I play the game in a way that it makes harder for me? That makes sense. It doesn't make any sense. Or if you're already struggling to get where you want to be in the game, then by all means, stay in trade. Do that. Maybe try hardcore if you enjoy that more, but that's also a hard mode, of course. But I think SSF, as I said, has more upsides than downsides. But this is all about the downsides. So more limited build choice. And I think that's a deal breaker for a lot of people who want to just try. I want to try this very specific build. I want to play this league. I want to try to min-max it as much as possible. And some builds, especially as league starters, are really hard to do in SSF. Build variety opens up a bit in SSF once you get to like a second or third character, because you can take the items and your whole stash from the first character onto the second character. So Solo-Selffound does not mean you are limited to just the loot on the character, but on all characters in this SSF league. So you have a shared stash, shared atlas, shared delve, and so on, as you do have in trade league. The only difference is you can't trade, you can't party with other people. And then the last thing is SSF does have some very tedious aspects. I think 6 links are one of them for me. It can be really annoying to get like the actual 6 link you want. Like, what do you do if you're, I don't know, you're playing low life or whatever? Low life is a bad comparison now that low life has changed a bit. But let's say last patch you want to play low life, you have a Chafron's Wrappings, but it just doesn't link. You like toss thousands upon thousands of fusings into it, and it just doesn't link. What are you going to do? In trade, you can be like, I guess I'm buying a 6-link version, then rip all my fusings, who cares? Or if you just can't find certain uniques you need for a build that you really wanted to try. Also, the Fragment and Invitation RNG can be pretty annoying. Like, before it was also with, like, Labyrinth rewards, but now, like, for Maven, if you just don't get the last, I don't know, synthesis map, like the last Cortex type boss, or you don't get the freaking Cortex for your Feared, and you really want to do the Feared fight and try it out. I had that last league. It took me forever to even get that, Cortex map. But once I had it, it was really fun. And then the other way around, it's like I had all the Breach Lords completed, but I didn't get the freaking Breach Lord invitation hidden. So there are some tedious aspects and some things that can be annoying grinds in SSF. So yeah, don't get me wrong, it exists. It's not all flowers and happiness. And lots of them improved this patch. I think one of the biggest ones were Labyrinth rewards. such as helmet enchants, but also being able to get lab trials. The general reward rework seems to be working really well with SSF from what they said. The Alva Temple that can now be itemized, because what happened to me before a lot of times was I got, like, let's say, a double corrupt room, I got a double corrupt for gems, like the Doriani gem room, but I didn't have level 20 gem yet. So do I let my Alva Temple sit there for like 1500 hours and not run any Alvas until I finally get a level 20 gem that I want to double corrupt? No, probably not. It's not worth it, I think. Now you can store the content till you want to run it, and I think that's a fantastic change. And as a last point, if you didn't know, you can always migrate back to Trade League anytime. So there's basically no risk in trying it out. So I think trying SSF out, even if you realize, like, once you get to maps, like, oh, this is quite tedious. I don't know if this is actually for me. I guess I wish I started in Trade League. You can just convert your Trade League. You can either convert a single character also, and you can also convert everything. What that does is it converts your Atlas, your Delve progression, like all the things over. There are very few things that don't get converted, such as master missions, for like, because there's some abuse cases with racing. But that's like really it. For the most part, you convert all your items and all your characters and everything. But yeah, it's also what happens if you find, let's say you play SSF and you find a freaking mirror on day 1 or day 2, or like any day, and you're like, oh damn it, I wish I could like go to trade now and like try something with the mirror, like sell it and make like a crazy build. You can also do that. You can just like put the mirror on one character and just migrate the one character and just have the mirror over without swapping over your SSF progression. So I think that's like very low risk, so I would recommend you trying it out. And as a last point, a very, very huge, humongous, amazing thanks to these people who helped me build my meme empire, making the trailers, making everything I do possible. I went from making like roughly a video a week, sometimes a video to every 2 weeks, to making several videos a week, a podcast, and streaming on the regular right now, thanks to these awesome people here. It's that what makes it possible. So yeah, if you would be so inclined to like check out the Patreon link, see if there's any incentive for you that you think would make it worth to support this Yoji over here, I would very much appreciate it. That would be very amazing. And yeah, thanks to all these people. Some of these awesome peeps have been supporting me for like many years now, and yeah, you're making a lot possible that otherwise wouldn't be possible, so that's amazing. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Yoji, and I will see you in the next one. And I wish I could end the thing. There we go. End.